My name is Judith Mackenzie, and in the first half of this video, we'll be looking at how to spin a wide range of exotic fibers. In the second half of the video, we'll use these same fibers and we'll create some interesting designer yarns by using some novelty yarn techniques. It would help you to have a really good basic understanding of spinning and plying to get the most benefit from this video. So I'd like to suggest that you use Patsy Z's video, Spinning Wool, the Basics and Beyond, for a refresher. Now just look at what the modern spinner has. We have the world at our fingertips. We have beautiful cashmeres from Tashkent. We have incredible alpaca from Peru, from the mountains, and cashmere and silk. It's so luxurious, from China. And from the wilds of Tibet, we have yak down. And from the great Canadian North, we have musk ox hair. And we can even find interesting things in our own backyard with the rabbit. Now, the royal rat, who is made out of all these exotic fibers, and I would like you to use this video as your roadmap and come with us on a trip. Take out your wheel, give it a good oiling so that it's all ready, and off we go. Our first stop is the wilds of South America, in the high Andes in Peru, Bolivia, and Chile. Here we find the llama family. The llama family is very large and is often called the camel of South America. Although there is no scientific proof they're related to camels, you can see the striking resemblance. The most familiar members of this family are the domesticated ones, the llama and its closest relative, the alpaca. Llamas were introduced to North America as a novelty animal, but they soon won the hearts of many people and have become a very popular pet.
Now in this one, what makes her fiber so nice is all this down she's got that when she sheds, and they usually shed in the spring and then sometimes again in the fall, you can just brush that out, and that way you don't collect as much of the guard hair, which she has a little bit more of than some of these other guys. The guard hair is, it's a really coarse piece of hair, and it's why people complain about wool sweaters, that they get scratched. And if you do have guard hair in that, it will scratch. It's just a very, very coarse piece of fiber, whereas some of this down, what they call the micron, is much finer. And now guard hair does have its uses. It's good for making rugs and rope and whatnot, and the Indians in South America do collect the guard hair and use it for things like that, for making halters for their llamas. And what this little girl's doing is a llama greeting is blowing softly on the other llama, and so that's how they communicate, by a soft blowing little kiss, and she loves to give llama kisses.
Alpacas soon followed their cousins to North America and are being bred here, as they are in South America, for their fleeces. Unlike llamas, alpacas have a single type of fiber, generally much finer and softer than the llama's sturdy coat. A rare type of alpaca, the suri, produces a long, silky, ringleted fleece that is a delight for hand spinners. As you can see, both llamas and alpacas produce long, lustrous fibers, anywhere from 8 to 30 inches in length, in a very wide selection of natural colors. They take dyes very well, and when overdyed, can give a very rich palette to work from. We can buy fiber from llamas and alpacas in several forms. We can buy it raw, like this beautiful suri alpaca, just as it comes from the animal. Or we can buy it in top or in roving. The difference between top and roving is that in top, everything that's short or damaged or broken has been combed out and discarded. In roving, everything's carded together. They both have their place, but top is the much better quality and is perfect, absolutely perfect. There's no waste in spinning top. When we spin alpaca or llama from the raw fiber, I like to separate out the guard hairs. I do that it's easy to do it with a set of Russian combs, or you can pull them out with your hands. I'll show you how to do it on the Russian comb. Simply charge the comb with the llama. This llama is quite nice. It has quite a wide range of fiber diameter. So I'm going to pull it out. This is called charging the comb. You notice the chaff comes out quite easily. And I just start with the combs. There are other ways to prepare the fiber. You can use a dog brush or, again, a little hair comb to comb it out. You can put it on hand cards and organize it. But this separates out the two fibers, and that's why I like it. It gives me a fiber that is long and strong. This is the guard hair coat of the llama, and I can spin this and use it for rugs or anything where I want a good hard-wearing surface, and I still have all the soft, fine llama in behind the comb, right on either side of the teeth, that I can use for projects like sweater yarns or blankets. It's very nice, very soft. Now if I want to just separate out the fiber, I can grab it and just pull it. It's an easy way too. It's not as fast, but the fiber will come apart. Just grab it and pull hard, and you'll get those two coats separate. I could also use my comb just to brush it out. And again, I'd grab it by the tip and just comb it out. This takes a lot of the chaff and organizes the fibers a little bit. Makes it a little easier for spinning. I am careful when I comb out my fibers, whether I use a comb like the little Viking comb that I'm using, or a dog brush or a hair comb, to keep them all organized so they're going in one direction. There's a big difference between the fiber end and the fiber tip, and you want to be consistent in how you draft out your yarn. If you have a drum carder, you can make your own roving by taking the alpaca and just opening it up a little bit. Here I'm using the llama that we looked at. I like the combination of the creamy and white fibers. I'm going to make a blend with it. Drum carders are wonderful for making blends, things that you can't necessarily buy. So I open it up just a little bit, put my hand on the carder, Now the role of the carder is to open the fiber up and to separate it and evenly distribute it. It's better, of course, like everything else in spinning, if you do it more than once. The more times you put the fiber through the drum carder, the smoother it'll be and the easier the spinning will be. So don't settle for just putting it through once. Take it off, put it back, strip it in half, and run it back through. I'll put just a little bit more on, and then we're going to take this off. The drum carder also takes a fair bit of the chaff out. And alpaca and llama are pretty open, so we don't have to worry about the chaff so much. I'm going to use a knitting needle. There's a little space here where you can just put the knitting needle underneath, loosen off the edge. Then I'm going to use a trick that Mabel Ross taught me. It's a wonderful trick for taking things off the drum carder. She used just a piece of paper. Here I have a paper bag. It's a really good weight. Newspaper is a bit light. And I'm just going to roll it off. And a few fibers stuck here, so I'm just going to come back and pull them up, tuck them in. Now this takes the fiber off very efficiently, and it doesn't disturb it. When you take it off for llama and alpaca, I'd like you to fold it this way. Let's roll it up. So you keep all the fibers lengthwise, because it's important preparation for spinning llama and alpaca. Then we can just roll it up, and it's all ready for when we want to spin it. Now, you of course can also make your own top. And remember the little Viking combs that we used when we first started preparing some of the alpaca? Well, I've combed a bit of the suri with it, and I'm going to take it off using a little diz. A diz is just something that has a hole in it. This one is one of my favorites, and it's an old pre-Columbian spindle whorl. I'll give it a little tug to start. And just put it through the opening here. Because we've used the combs, we have everything absolutely perfect. And all we have to do is pull it through the combs. Now, I do have to find a way of supporting that comb. So I'm just going to take the C-clamp off the carding machine and clamp that comb down. If you have Russian combs or English paddle combs, you can use those. Those are really designed for making top. You might look around if you belong to a guild. Sometimes guilds own quite a bit of equipment that they don't mind sharing. That's a very efficient way to use combs, because English paddle combs are a bit expensive, and you're not likely to use them all the time. So it's very nice to share that kind of equipment. Now I can just draft this out. The purpose of the hole is to determine how much fiber gets drafted through. So I just come back down and pull a little more fiber through. I want to get close to the fiber. There we go. And now the top is starting to come off. When you pull it through, you'll feel a little tug as all the little short fibers stay behind and only the really good long fibers come through. The reason we take it off with a diz is that it controls the diameter of the top. And just keep pulling, and keep pulling, keep pulling. You just keep pulling. It's astonishing how much can actually come off. And then some people like to fold it in half because it thickens it up a little bit. And that's called planking, when you fold it in half and you give it a little tug, and then they'd run it back through the diz. But as you can see, the preparation counts for a lot. It's very easy to spin a beautiful yarn out of something that has been prepared as top. Everything is evenly distributed, and there is an absolute perfect diameter, and all the short stuff is caught in behind here. Now, a word of caution about the combs. They're very sharp. Be careful how you use them and where you store them. When you buy alpaca or llama, it should be just like buying good sheep's wool. It should be like good human hair, healthy, lively, vibrant. It shouldn't have any dead or lifeless feelings about it. In wool grading, we call it kindliness of handle, how the fiber feels to your hands. One important thing to check is for strength, because if the fiber has a break in it, it really can't be used for a hand spinner. So we check it, we tug fairly hard, and if the fiber is strong and doesn't break, then it's suitable for us to use as a hand spinner. You can sometimes find that there's a fair bit of chaff. Look at the llama here. It has a fair bit of chaff in it. In sheep's wool, this would be a serious problem. In the llama, because the llama has very little crimp and it's a very straight fiber, and llama is a bit coarse too, most of that fiber will come out in the processing. However, you should be aware of it as waste, and the price when you buy llama or alpaca, if it's quite chaffy, you should take that into consideration for what you pay for it. Remember that it should be good and healthy. No matter how good a spinner you are, you can't improve the fiber if it wasn't healthy to start out with. So my favorite wheel, as you can see, has 2 treadles, and I'm only using one. I found that the way that I sit really made a difference to whether or not I had a lot of shoulder pain. And this way works best for me. And I find that in this particular wheel, it certainly moves just as smoothly as butter, even though I'm using 1 treadle. I think you have to be very careful how you sit at your wheel and find out what works best for your body. And the size of your legs, the size of your arms, the way you hold your shoulders, all really important. When we spin the alpaca and the llama, we want to spin to bring out its natural characteristics, to really enhance those things that we've chosen the fiber for. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to bring out the strength of the alpaca and its luster and the silkiness of its hand. And to do that, I've chosen a method of spinning that's called worsted. Worsted's a very definite method of spinning. It's not right or wrong, it's just worsted. And have a look at here where I'm drafting the fibers out. This is called attenuating the fibers. All it means is drawing them out. As I draw the fibers out, there's no twist in the web. All the twist stays above my fingers, between the wheel and my right hand. If you're right-handed, use your right hand to draft up with, pull the fibers up with. If you're left-handed, use your left hand. Whichever hand is most articulate should do the drafting. Worsted spinning is the slowest of all the spinning methods, and I'm sure you've heard it called inchworming, but it does produce perfect yarn, and we spin worsted because it does that. It produces something that is absolutely beautiful. There are no flaws in a worsted yarn, and anything that needs to be corrected, you do it in the single. So drafting up towards the wheel, not allowing any twist into the fiber here, keeping the fibers all parallel, all bring out those characteristics we were looking for. Whenever you want to spin for luster, you want the fibers to go in side by side. When the fibers are drafted in a parallel fashion, it increases the surface for light to reflect back off, making the fiber much more lustrous. It increases its strength as well. Now, when we spin the alpaca and the llama, we can spin a wide range of diameters of the fiber. If I wanted to spin a really thicker alpaca, I would reach over and just tighten the wheel a little bit. And as I tighten it up, it automatically drafts up a thicker, softer, twisted yarn. Now if I was using this yarn, this would be a lovely yarn. I'll show it to you doubled back on itself. Be a lovely yarn for sweater. It's soft, it's got a nice hand to it. It's perfectly appropriate at that weight for a sweater. However, if I wanted to make a really beautiful lace yarn, like for a lace scarf, or like my lap piece here can actually hold water. It's an old piece of alpaca that's been spun like a little stainless steel wire. And to do that, I'd reach down, I'd take some of the tension off the wheel. The more tension I take off the wheel, the higher the twist is, and the finer the diameter is. Within reason, diameter is a function of design. And so as we spin finer and finer, you might get to a point where it won't feed on the wheel anymore. And if that happens, you can go and change the spindle whirl. If I had a choice of spindle plates, not all wheels do, but this wheel does have many choices in spindle plates, I could now, if I wanted to spin a finer yarn than this, put on a spindle plate and drop the whirl size. However, many wheels don't have that many choices, and this is a good trick. You can lace the fiber, the yarn that you've already spun, the single, back and forth from side to side on the hooks on the wheel. When you do this, it's just like dropping down a whirl size, and your spinning will automatically become finer and finer and finer. So now if I wanted to spin even finer than this, I could put another lace on the hook. Every time I lace the hook, I drop the diameter by half. It's just a little trick that separates the drafting in speed from the wheel speed. And it allows you to spin a very fine yarn and not lose the twist per inch. It's still really strong and stable. Many wheels don't have the hooks on both sides of the flyer, but it's an easy job to put hooks on the other side of the flyer, and it doesn't really unbalance the flyer. The hooks can be put in by yourself. You can just use hooks you get from the hardware store, or if you're uneasy about doing that, somebody who does work with wood will be able to help you with it. When you have the tension adjusted perfectly on your wheel, it will feel like water flowing off your fingertips. I think it's really important to be very gentle when you adjust your wheel. A 32nd of an inch one way or the other will make a great difference in how it feels and the peaceful satisfaction you have in the work. Remember to think of your wheel more like a musical instrument. It needs very fine adjustments. Now, if spinning worsted is new to you, you may find that it gets literally out of hand. One of the big problems with spinning worsted is when the twist gets into the web and all of a sudden there you are trying to pull it out. The fibers turn on the side. You can see it becomes not a peaceful process anymore, but a real struggle, and you get the big thick and thin lumps. It can get into quite a mess. What happens when you let the twist go into the web like that, even the tiniest little bit slipping past your finger turns those fibers on the side and tangles them. Twist is like water. It wants to level itself out. It will flow through every bit of fiber in your hand if it's given half a chance to. Don't give it half a chance. You keep the twist above your finger, draft out, and guide the twist into the already stretched out fibers. That way you'll have the twist exactly doing what you want it to do and not having a mind of its own. We use twist. That's what we do in textiles. We use twist to do all sorts of things for us, and it's important to control where it goes. There's another draw that I like to use, especially with llama and alpaca. Traditionally, llama and alpaca are spun into very fine thread, and they make a material that is so dense and so long wearing it'll last 1,000 years, and it's tight enough that it'll carry water. But you know, if you're willing to settle for something that'll just last your lifetime, and you'd like something a little lighter weight and softer for a sweater, try this technique. In this technique, we take a chunk of the staple and break it down into what's a nice staple length where it just pulls between your fingers. Fold it over your finger. And again, you know, if you're left-handed, please use your right hand to hold the fiber. And then start the wheel. Let a few of the fibers tangle in. And then draft out of the folded fiber. This gives an interesting texture and allows the very stiff alpaca threads to hold a lot more air. Makes a more cellular yarn. It always has a little bit of a slub in it because of this bend. It's not going to be perfectly smooth, but it's a nice texture, and it's a good way of solving the problem of the little yarn that's like a stainless steel wire, and yet it's still very stable and it'll wear very well. You do sacrifice a little bit when that happens, but not much, not much. Now there are some problems. Oh, I've got a little short piece in there. Now when you're spinning worsted and you come across something like this, this is a short piece that's just plain old bad preparation in the roving that I'm working with. So I'm just going to take that out. In worsted, you don't want those short little mats or bits and pieces. You just stop, take them out, break off what was spun in, and then start again, and start again. And when we start, we just lay a little bit of the spun fiber against the unspun fiber, and then pull up, pull up. And it's still a worsted draw. That's why we call it semi-worsted, because the preparation isn't perfect worsted. It's not lying side by side. It's folded together. But the drafting doesn't allow any twist into the web. Remember, when you do get twist into the web, you're going to get a horrible, nasty tangle. When that happens, just stop. Stop. Take a deep breath, be calm, tear it off, and start again. It's not a problem to start again, and if you have to break off a few of those little lumpy bits, you go right ahead. Worsted really does like things to be pretty well done here. Now, when you join a thread in a worsted join, there's a really nice, simple way of joining worsted. What we do is we can take a few fibers, run them beside, and then pull up towards the wheel. That'll draft all the fibers in line. There's another one of those little preparation problems. Just take it out now. Take it out now. In worsted spinning, everything that goes onto the wheel should be perfect because you're not going to get it out later. What you see is what you get in worsted spinning. So practice that join. Practice it until you can do it without looking at it. It's second nature to you. It doesn't give you any qualms at all. And keep the fiber going up towards the wheel, always pulling towards the wheel, not allowing your hands to draft back. Again, for the semi-worsted, fold it over your finger, let a few fibers tangle on, and then pull up. The next stop on our exotic spinning tour is Mongolia. We can stop anywhere along the old silk routes, from the Arabian Sea to Siberia, to find our next fiber animal. It's the camel. The camel, who for centuries has been used as a pack animal in some of the most extreme climates on the earth. There are two types of camel. The one with one hump is a dromedary. The one with two humps is a Bactrian. It's the Bactrian that produces the most fiber, but you can use the fiber from either of them. Camels have a double coat with an outer layer of coarse hair and an inner layer of fine down, similar to cashmere. The inner fibers, called down, can reach up to a length of 5 inches, while the outer fibers can be as long as 15 inches. The camel is never shorn like a sheep. Instead, the camel sheds his fleece, and this is gathered from the ground. The hair and the down fibers are then separated by combing. The most expensive down is the very fine underdown that is combed out of the camel's fleece before the shedding process starts. Hand spinners can find every grade of camel easily available to them. The adventurous can track down camel like this, as it comes right off the animal. There are a number of camels owned privately and also in game farms and zoos. I would ask you to be very careful about bringing camel hair back from foreign countries. Camels are carriers of anthrax, and in North America we've never had anthrax, and so we would have absolutely no resistance to it. So do avoid bringing it back with you. Now, we're going to look at how camel is prepared. If you have wild camel like this, it's a very simple process to pull out the long guard hairs. And because they're so different, they really need to be pulled out. So just grasp, pull, take out those long guard hairs. You can save them for spinning rug warps. Just pull them out, get rid of them, and then you're left with a really nice assortment of down. The beautiful fibers, short, very soft, nice to the touch. But you have to get rid of those coarse fibers. Now, if you have camel like this is camel that's already been dehaired, I like to spin it carded a bit. And carding helps open the fibers up, and I use hand cards. I think if you're going to spin a lot of exotic fibers, investing in cotton cards is probably a really good idea. Cotton cards are finer than a normal card. The teeth are closer together, and they're a little bit more flexible. And they don't allow these fine fibers to sink in. So just as with normal carding, we're going to charge the card Hold the fiber in your hand, just run it over top. And don't put too much on the card. It's spinning, as always, haste makes waste. Put the card on your knee and then comb. Remember when you're carding that you want to stroke it like a cat. You don't want it to push hard. You don't want the teeth to engage. You don't want to have the teeth actually mesh together. If it's hard on your wrist, you're probably not doing it right. You need to adjust your hand a little bit. Really, the fiber is stroking the other fiber open. What we're trying to do is open the fiber up, even it out. Just gently bring it across. Bring the tip of one card up, rock it down, take the clean card, rock it down. That's how you can take it off on the back of your cards. Now, I use my cards as a little platform. I like to make ponies out of camel down, and I use my wooden knitting needle to do that. Wooden works a lot better than the metal ones. The metal ones are a bit too slippery. Then you just roll it up from the bottom, catch those fibers in, and roll it up. Now, if we left it at this stage, what we'd have is a roll egg. But to make a proper pony, we're going to add an additional twist to it. We'll put our thumb on the tip and just turn the stick. You can see how that tightens it down, and it adds a little bit of a diagonal twist. If you like to spin from ponies, because it makes it easier to spin a level yarn, the more even you make your pony, the more even the yarn will be. Just tighten it down, and then you just pull it off. When you take the pony off the stick, remember which is the top and which is the bottom. When you're spinning from a pony, it'll pull out a lot easier if you spin from the top. Many people like to make a bunch ahead of time, but just make sure that you mark which is the top. Lay them all out in the same direction. They'll draft out and make a nice smooth yarn that way. When we spin the ponies, we're going to spin them woolen. Woolen means that you allow the twist back into the web and then draft against that twist as it enters into the web. You've probably heard it called long draw. That's a good name for it. You see we pull way out and then let it all swoop in to the wheel. Let more twist enter into the web and then pull back, pull back, pull back. Don't worry in traditional woolen spinning about getting the yarn even. That's taken care of in the plying. If you spun worsted yarn with the lumps and bumps in it, you'd have a lumpy, bumpy worsted yarn. That's not true with woolen. Woolen is leveled out in the plying. Just let it feed all on. We choose woolen spinning because it gives the loftiest, softest yarn. And woolen spinning is traditionally done with any fiber that is 3.5 inches or shorter and has more than 7 crimps per inch. We need that crimp structure for us to be able to pull back like this and not have the fibers all sort themselves out. When the twist runs into the web, it turns the little fibers on side and they tangle and form a mesh that traps lots of air, makes the yarn really stable. A good woolen yarn is about 97% air. Compare it to a worsted yarn that's about 70% air. And you can see why woolen yarn makes a wonderful, lightweight, warm fabric. We sacrifice a bit in its strength and its durability, and we sacrifice a little bit of its long life, but we gain a lot in the warmth that we get from the fabric and the quickness that it can be spun. You can spin a woolen yarn much, much faster than a worsted yarn. So spinning woolen has some problems to spinning worsted, especially if you're a worsted spinner, you're going to have a hard time letting these little lumps and bumps go in. Let them go. If you fiddle with them, you're going to lose control of the twist, and then the yarn's just going to fall apart. Now, worsted does break fairly often, and if you're not used to woolen spinning, that's going to be one of the problems. You're going to find it flying into the wheel, being pulled in really fast, breaking off, the end disappearing, or like this, getting thinner and thinner until it's gone. Be calm. Don't worry about it. Don't adjust the wheel terribly so that you have more twist. You don't want more twist. You just want patience with this yarn. It's well worth it. It's well worth it. It's a lovely yarn when it's done right. Just take it back and join it. Woolen yarns are not nice to join, but if you persevere, you can get them. So it's a very delicate yarn. It's hardly got any spin in it at all. Very rarely use it as a single. It's almost always plied. And when plied, it doesn't even look like a plied yarn. It looks more like a single still. So when you join a woolen, add a little bit of the unspun thread over top of the spun thread here. Just let them catch together. So a little spun thread goes on top of the unspun fiber, and then you pull up towards the wheel a little bit and then start drafting back. Let that twist slip into the web so you can pull back against the twist. Again, it should be a really nice fluid motion, and let it go on. If you don't get enough twist in the web, don't open this hand enough so you get twist in there, and for you worsted spinners, that's going to be a problem. It's going to thin right out. The other problem is grasping this too tightly so the fiber can't slip out. Keep your hand relaxed, really relaxed. Just let the fiber run through. Don't correct the lumps and bumps, and give a little pull here, and then let it go on. Now when you spin woolen, it gives a matte finish, no luster, no shine, because the fibers are all turned on the side. And it will obscure any stitch that you're using. Whether you're knitting or weaving with it, you're going to find that the stitch doesn't show up. So it gives a good flat, matte surface. Fulls beautifully. Beautiful yarn for working with. Now, I'd like to show you another method for spinning camel. I quite often spin it just out of a mass in my hand. I'm quite comfortable doing that. And if you buy the already prepared top, you can then choose whether you want to spin it worsted or woolen. And you can see worsted camel is spun on exactly the same tension on this wheel. It's a very different yarn, very tight, very firm. And if you wanted to make a lace yarn, or you wanted to make the perfect warp for a scarf, this would be the correct way to spin it. But you can also, if you want to use it for a weft yarn or to make a beautiful knitting yarn, just let that twist run into the web and then pull back. And see the difference between the two methods. Twist run into the web and pull back. Ignoring those lumps and bumps, just let them go on. In woolen spinning, it's plying that levels the yarn out. Keep that hand relaxed. You might want to change the tension on your wheel if you feel that it's pulling way too fast into the wheel and you're getting a lot of little broken pieces. Do make sure that you've taken all the tension off your wheel. A very, very relaxed wheel to spin woolen. Our next exotic animal is the Angora goat. We could find this popular beast almost anywhere in the world, but Angora, Turkey is where it got its name. The fiber from the Angora goat is called mohair. It is smooth and lustrous, and when dyed gives glowing jewel-like colors. It is stronger than sheep's wool and sheds dirt and dust easily. Its most important use for centuries has been to make the pile in oriental carpets, and to produce upholstery fabrics. Since the 1940s, the fiber has been used to make wonderful brushed and looped yarns for lightweight sweaters and blankets.
And these get sheared twice a year, in the fall and the spring. So it'll get 4 to 6 inches long. It gets really long.
We are fortunate here in North America to have some of the best quality mohair in the world, and it's processed in the Texas mills. Mohair is sold in several different grades. You can buy kid mohair, which is very soft and very fine, a young adult, which is just a little bit coarser and doesn't have quite the same handle, but is quite a bit stronger, or adult, which is coarser but very long wearing, very hardy fiber. If you buy mohair in the grease, like it is here, you may have a hard time when you first look at it, trying to decide how fine it will be. This unwashed fleece is this kid, and you can see the kid is very lustrous and a very, very fine micron, very soft and lovely. But here it looks much thicker and coarser, and it's hard to believe it'll come out this white and lustrous. When you're buying mohair fleeces, you should look for long ringleted pieces. The tighter the ringlets are, the better the quality of the fleece, and usually the more lustrous and fine it will be. So look for these long ringleted pieces. Now traditionally, mohair is spun like a little stainless steel wire. It was used mainly for carpets. And that's what the goat was developed for and bred all those years, to produce a long, sturdy, very lustrous fiber. But it was meant for carpets, and so the high twist that's necessary to hold the fibers together made a lot of sense. When we're spinning for sweaters today, we like to put a little bit more loft in the yarn, but be really careful not to put too much air in this yarn, because you'll find it drifts apart. I think we all know about those sweaters that grow 4 inches every year. Mainly that's caused by not having enough twist in the yarn to hold the fibers together. What makes mohair so lustrous and so beautiful also makes it unable to hold its structure without a lot of mechanical help. It doesn't have any of the little ridges and scales that wool has. That's why it's so lustrous. And so we need to put extra twist in it to keep it together. Many times when people are spinning, they would like to think of mohair as a soft, fluffy fiber. But truly, mohair is made soft and fluffy with some pretty elaborate spinning techniques. They're easily done by a hand spinner, but you have to think ahead about how you're going to spin the fiber to hold it in place and keep it structurally strong. Sometimes when I'm spinning the mohair, I like to just pull it out in simple worsted, very simple worsted. Just draft it up towards the wheel. Just like with the problems with worsted, you don't want the twist to get into the web. Now to get the mohair like this, this is a commercial preparation. It's called a mohair top, and it's been combed out by a mechanical mill that does that. Be careful also when you're buying fleeces, and there are many available, many fleeces available. The buck fleeces smell quite strongly, and so far I certainly haven't found any way of getting rid of that smell. I'd like to, but I can't. So be very wary when you buy buck fleeces. It's not going to go away, no matter how beautiful they are. Mohair is a very versatile material to work with. Here I'm spinning the mohair top. That's been space dyed and gives me a wonderful intersections of color. Many different color ranges. It'll be a great basis for some of the designer yarns that we'll make in the second half of the video. I also really love mohair and silk together. They seem very compatible. Here I have some kid mohair that I've put on the card, just lay it a little bit gently on the card, and I'm going to make a blend with tussa silk. I take the silk and I'm just going to put a couple of stripes of silk across it. That way I can kind of figure out how much silk I'm going to put in every blend. It'll be similar all the way through. Again, I'm using the cotton cards because the fiber is so fine. I don't want to have the fiber pushed down into the cards. See how beautifully the kid mohair opens up? I especially love the way it makes a halo around the silk when it's spun. This, I'm really just trying to open the fibers up, not really interested in having them perfectly blended. You can blend fibers together in many different ways. We could have also spun a single of the mohair and a single of the silk and plied them together. That'd be nice too. But this works very well. Now, I'm going to do a little very non-traditional carding. I'm going to do push right against the edge here. Treat my cards just a little bit more like a comb. And then I'm going to spin off the end of the card. It gives a beautiful yarn, and it's a very simple way of spinning. It's a nice way to start if you're helping somebody spin. That's a big problem when they're worsted spinning, of pulling back against the fiber. This will help them not pull back. I can hold the card really straight. You can see what a perfect little thread it produces. Easy, very easy preparation and very nice mix. I can just work my way across from one side and then keep pulling. I'll go back. I may leave a little bit of fiber left in the card. You can re-card it and you'll get quite a bit more out of it. Or you can save what's left in the card and blend it on your drum carder for other fiber blends. In spinning, nothing gets wasted. We use every little bit of it. This will be a nice high handle, nice feel to this yarn. The animal that is closely related to the Angora goat is the Cashmere goat. We could go see it in Tibet, India, China, and many other places in Central Asia, but we could see it right here in North America as well. The goats have been introduced recently, both for their fiber and as brushers to control weed growth in range areas. They are extremely hardy, small, short-legged, and they're very independent. The Cashmere is the short under-down coat that they shed yearly.
When did you shear?
Actually, actually they just shed out in the spring. You can shear them, but then you get a lot of guard hairs. They do have guard hairs. You know, the coarser.
So when they
like
shed
this,
out,
and then they have the down.
and then you just comb them out?
I've just been combing them out so I would get less guard hairs because I have not sent it off to be processed.
The average goat produces 2 to 3 ounces a year, which means it takes about 6 goats to produce a sweater. No wonder they sell for the prices they do. Cashmere is available for hand spinners in many different forms. This is cashmere top, and it's all been combed out so that you have just the long, silky fibers to spin. This is cashmere in the matte form, and here all the short and the long fibers are mixed together. And here is a fiber blend. This is tussa silk and cashmere blended together to produce a very luxurious fiber. And beautiful to spin. When we spin cashmere, we have to look at the fiber preparation and the way that we're going to use it to decide how best to spin it. If I'm spinning the top, I'm going to spin it worsted. Spinning cashmere is very much like spinning the camel. When I have the top, I can spin right out of it, just as we did the camel top. And I keep a proper worsted spinning technique. The fibers drafted up towards the wheel. And remember too, cashmere is usually spun very fine. That's because we ply it together to protect all these fine, delicate fibers. Cashmere is a very warm fiber and a wonderful hand, but it's not particularly strong. Cashmere, when you buy cashmere sweaters commercially spun, they're sold by the ply. And a 12-ply yarn is fairly common for commercial sweaters, and they usually consider it $100 a ply. So good worsted spinning, draft up towards the wheel. If you find it tricky to get the amount of twist that you want, the wheel's pulling on too hard, then do put that double lace in it. That'll help you keep the diameter fine, give you easy spinning. We could also spin this woolen by just letting the twist run into the web and drafting back a little bit. This will give us a lot loftier yarn, one that won't wear so well, but in weaving it would fold beautifully, open up and respond to the washing process. So we can draft it out. That's a variation on a long draw, not a true long draw because the fibers aren't crossed. I like to spin the cashmere that's in the mat form just out of my hand. It's a very easy way to spin it. And keeps all the deliberate crosses in there, makes a nice lofty yarn. And again, this would be spun woolen, letting the twist run into that tangle and then pulling forward. Pull back with your left hand. You can take that little bit of trash off. Let's pull back. Oh, there's another one. And then let it all go on. And draft back. This makes a nice lofty yarn. Definitely needs to be plied to be strong and to be protected. Just let the twist run into the web and draft back. When you spin woolen, you're spinning for fabric that will be soft and light and that you won't see the stitch. In worsted, you'll see all the stitches. That's one of the ways that you choose which type of which kind of draw that you're going to use. Now, if we spin top that comes from a fiber blend, we have to think about which one we're going to spin for. And again, it depends on what characteristics we want to enhance. That's what good yarn design is all about, is deciding what spinning technique works best to give you the end product that you want. If I want to show the luster and the silkiness of this fiber, which is a blend of silk and cashmere, I'm going to draft up, because when I draft up towards the wheel, I always increase luster. No matter what kind of fiber it is that I'm spinning, I'll make it more lustrous. Those fibers are all lying parallel now, and they'll reflect back more light. If I want to increase the loftiness that cashmere has, I don't mind sacrificing a bit of the luster, then I'll spin back. I'll let the twist go into the web, and I'll draft back. When I draft back, pulling against fiber that has twist entered into it already, those fibers turn on their side and the ends stick out. They make a very lofty surface. It's just deciding what you best want to use it for. Woolen yarns are used primarily for weaving. France developed our next exotic fiber. Angora rabbits were the pets of French kings in the 14th century. They are easily raised at home and they make wonderful pets. They come in a wide range of natural colors. There are 3 main types: French, English, and German. The French have a wider variety of colors, but they also have the coarsest fibers and the largest percentage of guard hairs. The English have the finest fur and produce more than the French. but they are difficult to groom because their face and ears and feet need to be brushed all the time. The Germans are very large, with a long silky coat. Traditionally, they're shorn, while the French and the English are plucked when their fur starts to shed naturally. Angora rabbit of all kinds is very soft, but can hold a very high pile, giving it the ability to produce more heat than most fibers. When we buy rabbit fur for hand spinning, it's called Angora. It's available in a number of different forms for the hand spinner. This is what it looks like when it comes from the breeder. We can also buy it carded in roving. There are many commercial preparations, and Angora is often put in blends. A little bit of Angora rabbit in a blend goes a very long way. It shows up in a halo around the yarn and makes the yarn very soft and very warm. Even 10% Angora rabbit makes a big difference. When I spin Angora rabbit, I just like to take it in a clump and open it up and spin it directly from the mass in my hand. I use a little different draw when I'm spinning Angora rabbit because the rabbit's slippery. It needs a woolen draw so that the fibers will turn on the side and make the nice halo that we like Angora rabbit for. So I let the twist run in the web, and then I pull forward. By pulling forward, I manage to give the fibers a little more stability, a little more strength. By letting the twist run into the web, I get the fluffiness that I want. This works really well for a number of fibers that are slippery. How you finish the rabbit is very important. When you finish the spinning process, completed the plying or the cabling that you wish to do, in this case we've made a 2-ply rabbit from the rabbit we were spinning earlier, you take it and put it in really hot water. It should be as hot as your hands can actually stand. And a little bit of soap will help. It'll help get the rabbit wet faster. It works as a wetting agent. And then pound it ferociously. Don't be gentle with it. Be really fierce. If you have a lot of rabbit or a lot of yarn that needs fulling, which is what this process is called, you can do it in a bucket with a plunger. That works really well too. I did try to do it in the washing machine. It didn't work. It was very unsuccessful. So a bucket, a plunger, or for small skeins, just a bowl, but really work it. And pound it for a little while. Give it a good squeeze, and then drop it in this ice-cold water. And yes, I'm doing exactly what you think I'm doing. I'm felting it a little bit. I'm going to put it back in the hot water now, and I'm going to work it a little bit more. Pound it and pound it. And as I said before, don't be gentle. Give it a good pound. Squeeze it back in the icy cold water. You could do this maybe 4 or 5 times. And a few more times if your skein's really big so you get all the little fibers meshed together. The purpose of this is to mesh the fibers, tighten them down. You really are felting it just a slight little bit. It prevents shedding and it prevents stretching. Those are 2 big things. I'm going to take it out now and roll it in this cloth and just extract a bit of the water. Give it a good press. Roll it forward. Then I'm going to press hard on it, just extract as much water as I can. The last step in this process is to take it out. And again, don't be gentle with it. Give it a good, fierce snap on the edge of the counter or against the wall. Hold the skein in one end like this and just snap. The snapping process opens the fibers up, levels out the twist, and gives the yarn a most wonderful hand. And it makes it really stable. It tightens everything. I'm going to do it one more time. You can see the difference in the yarn. It's become softer, fluffier, it's more opened up, and the twist is leveled out in it quite a bit. This fulling process is used for many other fibers other than Angora rabbit. We can use it for the Musk Ox fiber, for cashmere, for dog hair. It's very successful for dog hair, and for any sheep's wool that's 3.5 inches or shorter and has more than 7 crimps per inch. These fibers are all classed as down fibers. Don't neglect that other domestic pet. Dogs have been raised for fiber in many cultures, and surely it must rank as one of the great untapped resources for the hand spinner. But any dog that has an undercoat is spinnable, like this borzoi. Here are some examples of dog hair that would be wonderful fun to spin. This is English sheepdog, and it's been collected by brushing the sheepdog. Okay. A lot of fleece off one dog. And over here is Keeshond. Keeshond comes in this lovely smoky gray and creamy color. And here, man's very best friend, the golden retriever. It actually produces quite a lot of a very fine, soft down coat. And this is the borzoi. This is what I'm going to spin. It's very silky, very beautiful. I like to spin dog hair very similarly to how I spun the rabbit, just from an open clump in my hand. I open it up first to make sure there's no tight places. And just hold it in a tangle like this. Start your wheel. We use the same technique that we used for rabbit, that semi-woolen technique, where you let a little twist tangle into the web and then tug forward. It's different than woolen. In woolen spinning, what we do is we let the twist run into the web and then we draw a long fiber out of it. In this case, we just tug forward. It's a very short motion. But the twist is in there, you pull against it, pull up towards the wheel. Don't worry about the lumps and bumps. They come out in the plying. Dogs actually produce quite a lot of hair. When we look at the cashmere goat and the rabbit and the musk ox, we're looking at ounces of hair that they can produce. But as any dog owner will tell you, that Samoyed or husky will produce many pounds of hair a year. It doesn't hurt the dog either. It's just a grooming process. We take the hair out in the spring when it naturally sheds. And the smell washes out perfectly. The last stop on our exotic fiber tour is the Great Canadian North. Here, the musk ox roam free in large herds across the flat tundra. These animals thrive in weather that is often minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit, with a howling wind as well. No wonder they produce the lightest, warmest fiber we know of, and they produce lots of it. A musk ox will produce about 3 to 5 pounds of Quiviuet, the down undercoat. There are musk ox in captivity in the United States, both privately and in zoos, and there are some being domesticated in Montana. The fiber is a little difficult to find these days, but a little of it goes a very long way. The royal rat, who's been our fellow traveler on this trip through the exotic fibers, is made almost entirely of cashmere and Quiviuet used in different ways. You can see his body has been woven and then felted from Quiviuet, and his little feet are knit and then felted out of Quiviuet. His jacket is a combination of cashmere and Quiviuet. Again, the yarns have been fulled to open them up and make them soft and light and warm. Now you can get Quiviuet in a number of different forms. You can buy it like this. This is raw and it has been dehaired. That means the long, coarse guard hairs have all been removed. It's a long, tedious job to remove the guard hairs, so it's nice when you can buy it this way. And you can also get it in roving form, where it's been processed a little bit more. This is not spun, it's just a little roving. You can also buy it in blends. There are some beautiful, beautiful cashmere and silk and Quiviuet blends available, and it's often blended with merino. Now, the reason that we blend it with merino is to make it a little less expensive, because it's a very dear fiber, and it makes it a little less warm. This is so warm that used by itself, you have to be careful to spin it quite fine. Now I spin Quiviuet just like I spun the rabbit and the dog. Again, it's a crimpy but silky fiber. I use that semi-woolen technique again. And I find it very successful. If you wanted to make a warp out of this, you could certainly spin it worsted. But just let that little bit of twist pop in, let it pop in, and then draw up towards the wheel. Keep the Quiviuet spun quite fine. You know, in many fibers, the diameter that you spin is simply a function of design. But in Quiviuet, it is so very warm that if you spin a thick yarn out of it, you'll find it almost useless. Won't give you very much pleasure. You'll be roasted. So let the twist just snap in, keep it fine. It's actually fairly simple to spin it fine. Remember, if your wheel pulls in too much, that you can use that trick of double lacing, and that will help you a lot, not have too much tug. So if you have a lot of tug on your wheel, just double lace it like this. You can card it, you can make ponies, treat it just like we did the camel if you like. But you can also, as you can see here, spin perfectly well just right out of the fleece. Now, one of the reasons that you should spin it very fine is because it's so warm. In the Smithsonian, there's a beautiful wedding dress. It could cover you from head to toe, and it weighs 4 ounces. I think 8 ounces would be adequate for any project you decided to undertake with Quiviuet. I like to ply the Musk Ox because I think it makes it more stable, and the plying protects the delicate fibers. And just as we did with the rabbit, it's important, I think, to full it. It opens up the fiber. Here this skein has not been fulled, not been put in the hot soapy water and then into the cold water. And you can see on here how the fibers have opened up and relaxed. It's become much softer, much easier to work with. Musk Ox also dyes very well. Takes dyes in very deep tones, but they're jewel-like and quite lovely. This is using just a hot acid dye. Any commercial dye that'll dye wool or silk will work well on it. In the first half of this video, we processed and spun a variety of exotic fibers using traditional spinning methods. Now, let's look at how novelty spinning techniques can be used to add extra interest to these fibers. Plying is the basis of novelty yarns, and while I know you already know how to ply, let's do a quick review. I'm going to use the brown alpaca that I spun worsted in the first half of this video. Because I spun it worsted, I'm going to move up 1 spindle whirl. Had I spun it woolen, I would move down to ply. Worsted, I'm going to move up. To join the plied yarns, simply open up the leader, pop as many singles as you wish to ply, and let it snap back around it. And then just start the wheel. Remember to turn it in the opposite direction in which you spun the singles. When you're plying, it's important to keep even tension on both singles. And there's no right or wrong way to do that. Any way that you can do it, do it. I'll show you what I do. I put my finger on this thread, my thumb on this thread. I rock them back. I keep these fingers, keep the tension on the thread, and then I just pull forward. I keep my finger in between the threads that I'm plying, and that allows me to correct things. I can use my thumb to take out little bits of chaff, and I can tuck little hairy pieces in or take out slubs. Remember, if you do have big slubs or places that are uncharacteristically thin, just take them out. Just because you spun them as singles doesn't mean you have to keep them. Now, when I spin a 3-ply, I simply add one more thread in. And the same thing. You have to organize your hands a little bit differently, but it's the same theory. Just lay it in between, rock your fingers back, and organize your hand so that you can hold all 3 threads at once. And here, grasp, pull forward, let the twist follow your fingers back up. Grasp, pull forward, and let the twist follow your fingers back up. If you should happen to break a thread, I'll break one for you. Don't panic. Don't worry about it. It's a very simple method of joining. Just lay it in between the 2. Take that little end, lay it in between the 2. Draft them back together. Should be no space. Oh. No worry. Join often so that you feel really confident in it. Just break it off. Join it in. Pull it through. Yep, see now there's one that broke all on its own without any help from me at all. And it gives me a nice feathered edge to join in. I just lay it in between the 2 and start again. Put my 3rd one in and start again. Breaks shouldn't give you any problems at all, and they are going to happen. Now I'm going to add another thread in to do the 4-ply. Keep them all separated and just keep pulling. You see, the tension is very important that you keep it even. Separate them all out. I can do up to about a 6-ply by just using my fingers, organizing my fingers. But anything more than that, I need help. Remember to move your hooks often when you're plying. And always remember to turn the wheel in the opposite direction. Someday you're not going to do that, and you're going to turn out a yarn that looks quite peculiar. Don't panic. Simply take the yarn and run it back through the wheel in the proper direction, and it'll straighten all the twist back out. The first novelty yarn that we're going to make is a spiral yarn, and it will show you how plying is really important. Here we're going to take a single of the alpaca that's been dyed blue and a rough spun silk single. We're going to not keep even tension this time. We're going to relax the silk single across the alpaca. You can see how it buckles in and forms an interesting texture. Keep the single that's tightly spun quite firmly held and then just let the silk relax around it. This yarn gives a very interesting texture when it's cabled, and it really is quite a large family of yarns. We can use it in a number of different ways. You can do a spiral yarn with a wide combination of fibers and threads. You can use different weights and different materials. But all spiral yarns need to be cabled to be completed and to make them balanced yarns, and that's what we're going to do next. Cabling means that you take 2 or more plied yarns and put a reverse twist on them. Here I'm using the Camel that I spun in the first half of the video to make a lovely knitting yarn. I have 2 bobbins filled with a very firmly plied 2-ply. You can see that the yarn has lots of energy, kinks rapidly. I keep a firm grip on it and I ply quite quickly in the opposite direction. In this case, we spun the singles to the right, we plied to the left, and so when we cable, we go back to the right again. Each time we do this process, we just reverse the twist. Cable yarns are very, very strong and very durable. I always try to remember tow truck cable. They can take a lot of pressure, they're wonderful in a warp, and they knit up beautifully. Now they are heavier than a 4-ply yarn, which would use the same number of threads. Here you can see a 4-ply yarn and a 4-strand cable. They have the same number of threads, but very different surfaces. This is a single of Angora rabbit, and I've space dyed it in the ball to give lots of variety of color, and we're going to use it to make simple knot yarns. Knot yarns are a family, and there's many variations. I'm going to use it with a solid colored wool, and it's just like simple plying. We open up the leader, pop in the 2 threads, and turn the wheel to the left. Now let's go back and look at that simple spiral that we made. If we do it with a multicolor, look at the effect. We can put one as a spiral and then reverse and make the other spiral. Make one as the spiral, reverse, and make the other as a spiral. Very simple, very pleasing. Play with color. Just like being a painter. Now, the variation that you can do on the spiral is very simple. Lots of times we do it accidentally, but it does have a name, and it's called a Turkish knot. And here what we do is we take the spiral yarn and we just let it slip back a little bit, and back, and back, and back. We can make little knots, very little tiny knots. We can make big knots. The trick is to go back and forth and to build up the texture. Like most designer yarns, these yarns will need to be cabled to be finished. We can also make cocoons, variation on the knot yarn. And in a cocoon, we go straight up and then wrap. Go straight up and then wrap. I think the variegated yarn makes it look like a little string of beads. Straight up and then wrap. Gimped yarns are a variation on that. It's just a huge sloppy knot. Huge sloppy knot. We can decide how much of the surface we want to cover. We can cover the whole yarn if we wish. These are very interesting when they're plied with brushed yarns and mohairs. Let's have a look at the yarns when they're finished by being cabled back. They're not always cabled back on themselves. This is a cocoon and knot yarn that has been cabled back with a little mohair. This is a gimped yarn that's been cabled back on a silk single. And this knot yarn has been cabled back on itself. The next group of yarns we're going to look at all come from adding unspun fiber to an already spun fiber. In this one, I'm going to use this lovely kid mohair. I dyed it just in one pot by putting different color dyes in the corner of the pots and letting it simmer away, and a single of wool that's a solid color. Now the wool single is a warp spun single. Now warp spun means that it's been really tightly spun to the right. It's important what side you hold the fiber in when we do this technique, and it has nothing to do with whether you're right or left-handed. As we spin this yarn, our single is going to open up. We're going to spin it to the left, just as if we were plying it. And as it opens up, we're going to enter the fiber in. If you hold it on the right-hand side, very little fiber will catch on and it'll be quite awkward to do. But here, you can see what happens. The mohair simply falls into the little crack and snaps shut. I always think of this as the chicken soup yarn because every spinner should have a good supply of it on hand. There are many, many yarns you can use this as a basis for, and it's beautiful to ply with a lot of the novelty yarns. Remember, in the first part of the video, we talked about how traditionally mohair is spun like a little stainless steel wire. Well, this is one of the constructed yarns that allows mohair to have a loopy, brushed surface, very airy and light. I often use this yarn when it's plied back on itself or with another single as a warp. It's incredibly strong and quite stable, though I don't think I'd feel really comfortable using it as a single. You can put as much mohair on or as little. That's simply a design choice. We're going to use these threads for our next technique. The top thread on the rack is a simple flat lurex, multicolored. The next is a sewing thread that's been plied to the right, spun to the left, just as the bottom one, also a sewing thread, spun to the left, spun to the right, plied to the left. When you're doing designer yarns, it's important to remember and check which way things are spun. We're just going to start them in the leader, as we always do. We're going to spin it to the left. When you're spinning a designer yarn, it's important to ask what you're doing to what. And in this case, we're going to tighten both the cotton threads because the last time they were spun was to the left. I'm running the lurex and the cotton thread together on one side of the ply because lurex by itself isn't strong enough to support any technique, and if it broke, then the yarn would be at risk. We're going to use the same mohair that we used before, and we're going to add it in between, in the little V that opens up as we ply. Encasement can be used with many, many different materials. Make sure your mohair is open, put it in, just give it a little pull. Put it in, give it a little pull. It's a very soft, delicate yarn. It's very stable. Catches those little fibers right in there. It's your choice how much you want to put in. You can put a lot in, almost covering up the base threads. You can put it in and quite textured and rough looking. Or just coat it, just delicately coat it. I find it easier if I want just a light coating to draft up like this. Put it in the V, pull your hand up. A little odd piece like that, just tuck it in a little bit. I learned to do encasement from the Aboriginal people where I lived in Canada. They use it with eagle down. I use it for a ceremonial yarn. You can put many things in between here. Bits of yarn, bits of material, beads, little treasures. It's a good way to stretch a precious fiber. You can use it as it is. It's a very stable and balanced yarn just as it comes off. Or you can cable it back on itself. Or you can use it in one of the elements for other design yarns. The next group of yarns we're going to look at are boucle yarns. Now boucles are a big family of yarns. They're all based on the same simple process. I'm going to turn the wheel to the left. We're going to hold one yarn tight and one yarn loose. What defines a boucle is what defined our simple silk yarn before. When we made our spiral yarn, we turned it on its edge. That little loop that started to form, that's the basis of a boucle. In a boucle, we hold one yarn tight, one yarn loose, and we let it roll back on itself. Now we can do this with lots of different fibers and in lots of different ways. We can make a very subtle, soft yarn with this silk. We can stop. We're going to take the silk, use the silk as a core thread, and add some mohair to it. And again, what makes this a boucle is having the yarn on its edge. It's turned to the side. That 90-degree angle is really important. That's the difference between a plied yarn and a boucled yarn. And here, where we have a very soft yarn and a very firm yarn, we get a much more pronounced boucle. All the boucle yarns are cabled back to finish them. There's another boucle that we can make that's quite interesting. It's not a traditional boucle, and it's a little more work, but it's a lot of fun. Simply take your tight one, hold it tight, take the loose one, and push a loop up. Just push the little loops up. You can push them up fairly randomly, or you can push them up absolutely, mathematically, perfectly. And just keep pushing the little loops up. Fill your bobbin with the yarn with all the little loops pushed up. And the next step is to simply take that same yarn and just run it back through here. Take the binder thread that you used before and cut back into the little loops. Now I'm turning the wheel in the opposite direction. It's very similar to doing a cable. And now I wrap all the little loops around here. Boucle yarns take quite a number of steps, but in textiles they save us a lot of time. They hold their space because of the structure that they have. Now we would fill 2 bobbins full of this, our constructed yarn, and then cable it back on itself to make a real traditional loop boucle. Very lacy, very light, very, very strong. This yarn was made by boucling the frosted yarn back around itself and then plying the two together. It's very lightweight, it's very warm, it's strong enough to use as a warp, and it makes a wonderful knitting yarn. It holds its shape no matter what you do to it. So our last group of yarns are the slub yarns. I think you remember making slubs when you were beginner spinners. And it's always interesting to me that it's very difficult when you want to make a slub on purpose. But slubs really are useful. A lot of the yarns we've made in the video were made using textures that were created by slubs. So let's do one on purpose. To make a slub yarn, join your yarn, put your fiber on your leader just as you normally would, and then pull out hard. Come back, pull up, slide back, pull up, slide back, pull up, slide back. You can see how the rhythm, pulling the slubs up, has them occur in a pretty orderly fashion. Now I'm using a marled fiber. It's a prepared top. It's Corriedale. There are many colors in it, and I like to use it for slub yarns because as I work back and forth across the top, I can change the color of the slubs a wee bit. Slub yarns are a lot like the brushed mohair yarn that we did. And I have a chicken soup yarn. There are many, many things we can do with it. I like to see it boucled back. You can ply it back on itself. You can use it combined with mohair yarns. It'd be very pretty to do that. But the trick is to pull it farther than it will normally feel like it's going to hold. You should have a little uneasy feeling as you pull out. So you get to this point, you think, oh, it's not going to hold, slide down. Now it's important that you keep your thumb on the slub and keep it packed pretty tightly. That's a big difference between what we did as beginners, where we were just pulling it out and hoping for the best. Let's take a look at what we can do with this slubbed yarn. I'm just going to wind it back in my finger. And of course, if you were making yarns, you'd have a whole bobbin full. I'm going to run it back on my finger, and then I'm going to boucle it back around a little mohair yarn that we made earlier. It's just a brushed mohair. This is going to be my core yarn. You'll be surprised at how big those slubs are when they start to show up when we ply them. Put the little mohair yarn on. Hold the mohair yarn tight, wrap the slub around it. Tight, wrap the slub around it. You see how they pop up? Just let it relax in. The reason that we cable yarns is so that they will be balanced and relaxed. Most of our designer yarns have threads going some to the left and some to the right. So the cabling relaxes the twists, lets them mesh together. Let's see what this would look like as a cabled yarn. See how quickly it snaps together? If we didn't cable it, it would end up just in a big snarled mess. Just let the yarn snap back around itself. And there, you can see the texture of the yarn now. And you can see how the slub brings out a really nice texture. I like it with the mohair, with a little bit of fluff in there. Looks almost braided. So all cables don't have to be smooth and even. This is the end of our time together, but of course it's just the beginning of your own yarn design. I hope you'll try these techniques with a wide variety of fibers. I love linen boucles. I want you to always remember to ask what happens if, and I wish you very happy spinning.